Right now, if someone you love was gone tonight, some part of you would still expect a text from them tomorrow. Your brain would keep their number saved, keep their voice in your head, keep setting a place for them without even thinking about it. This is not an exaggeration. For over 300,000 years, the human brain has refused to accept that someone is simply gone. Not because you're weak, because your ancestors needed you to feel that way to survive. Tonight, somewhere in the world, someone is setting out food for a person who is no longer there. Someone is talking out loud to an empty room, certain they're still being heard. But for over 99% of human history, this wasn't strange behavior. It was the entire foundation of human society. Every culture on every continent built something around this exact feeling. Long before religion had a name, long before anyone wrote anything down, humans were already convinced that a person doesn't just stop existing the moment their body does. Think about this. That belief had to come from somewhere. It wasn't taught in a classroom or handed down in a book. It showed up independently, over and over, in groups of humans who never once made contact with each other. But the story of what your ancestors actually believed happened next is stranger than almost anyone realizes. And once you hear it, you'll understand exactly why your brain still refuses to let go. Around 100,000 years ago, something changed in how humans treated a person who had passed. Archaeologists digging at Qafzeh Cave in what is now Israel found something that should not have existed yet. A body, carefully placed, surrounded by red ochre pigment and antler bones arranged by hand. Not dumped, not discarded, arranged. Archaeologist Paul Pettitt has spent decades studying burial evidence like this, and his research points to one conclusion. Early humans weren't just removing a body from camp, so they were performing a ritual, on purpose, with intention, tens of thousands of years before writing, before agriculture, before anything we'd call civilization. This is not an exaggeration. Red ochre burial sites have been found on nearly every continent, created by groups who never met each other and never shared a language. Different tribes, different continents, thousands of years apart, somehow arriving at the exact same idea that the people you lose don't just stop mattering. The number that stuns most researchers isn't the age of the burial, it's how consistent the pattern is. At Sunghir in modern-day Russia, archaeologists found two children buried nearly 34,000 years ago, covered in over 10,000 hand-carved ivory beads. Each bead alone would have taken roughly 45 minutes to carve by hand. That means this single burial represented thousands of hours of labor from an entire community for two children in a world where every single hour was needed just to stay alive. Something in the earliest human mind insisted there had to be more to it than an ending. Think about this. If losing someone was purely practical, early humans would have moved on fast. Food was scarce. Time spent mourning was time not spent hunting, gathering, surviving. But they didn't move on fast. Some Neanderthal burial sites, like the one at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, show pollen clusters around a body, leading some researchers to believe flowers were placed there deliberately. A creature we once assumed was little more than a brute may have been grieving in a way we still recognize today. The answer changes everything. These weren't isolated acts of sadness, they were the beginning of belief itself. Once humans started burying with intention, they started building entire structures around a single question. Where did that person go? By 9600 BCE, at a site called Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, humans who hadn't even invented farming yet were dragging 20-ton stone pillars into place to build what many archaeologists believe was a monument tied to honoring the past. No pottery, no writing, no wheels. But somehow, an organized labor force willing to move stones the size of a school bus for a belief system we're still trying to fully understand. Even today, that same question your ancestors asked at Qafzeh Cave and Göbekli Tepe is still unanswered. Modern research on near-death experience, led by psychiatrist Bruce Greyson at the University of Virginia, has studied thousands of cases where people report vivid awareness during moments they were clinically unresponsive. Greyson isn't claiming proof of an afterlife, but he is documenting something consistent enough across enough unrelated people that the brain's relationship to mortality clearly runs far deeper than simple fear. And your brain still asks that same ancient question every single time you lose someone. Because it's not exaggeration. Thousands of years later, in ancient Egypt, that same question turned into an entire civilization's obsession. Egyptians didn't just bury the past, they wrote instructions for them. The Book of the Dead wasn't a religious text in the way we think of one today. It was closer to a survival guide, written for a journey they were completely certain was real. Think about this. An entire empire, thousands of years of resources, some of the largest structures ever built by human hands, all pointed toward one single belief: that the story doesn't end when the body stops. Here's what this actually means for you. That moment where you almost call someone who's gone. That's not a glitch. That's 100,000 years of ancestors who refused to treat loss as an ending. Neuroscientist Mary Frances O'Connor at the University of Arizona studies exactly this. Her research on what's called the grieving brain found that your mind actually treats a lost loved one as a location, not a memory. So instead of simply remembering them, part of your brain keeps searching for them, the same way it would search for a person who just left the room. This is not an exaggeration. Grief researchers describe something called continuing bonds. The idea that healthy grieving doesn't mean forgetting someone, it means finding a new relationship with their absence. Your ancestors were doing this with red ochre and carved ivory beads. You do it by keeping a photo on your phone, or talking to them in your head before a big decision. Same instinct, just a different tool. Even the guilt some people feel for moving forward after a loss traces back to this same wiring. Your brain isn't built to file someone away. It's built to keep searching. The fear of losing someone, the need for ritual when it happens, the refusal to let a person simply vanish from your world. None of that is weakness. It's the oldest system your brain has, even today. Psychologist Colin Murray Parks, one of the earliest researchers to formally study grief, found that the intensity of it isn't random. It's proportional to how deeply that person was woven into your sense of safety. Which means the pain you feel isn't a sign something is wrong with you. It's proof the ancient bonding system worked exactly the way it was supposed to. So what actually happens after we die? Science still doesn't have a final answer, but your ancestors already answered a different question a long time ago. What happens to the people who are left behind? They grieve. They ritualize. They drag 20-ton stones across a landscape just to have somewhere to put the feeling. They refuse to let go completely. And 100,000 years later, so do you. Every time you think of someone who's gone and feel that pull in your chest, you're not broken. You're running the same ancient program that built the first human burial site, the same program that carved 10,000 beads by hand, the same program that raised Göbekli Tepe out of bare rock before humans even had a word for religion. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are just ancient. If this made you think of someone, hit like before you scroll away. Subscribe if your brain hasn't updated in 300,000 years either. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you still do for someone who's gone?